In the heart of the United States, on a cold winter night, a man walked alone down a deserted street. His footsteps echoed in the silence, as if carrying the weight of invisible battles. His name was Ethan Miller, a former soldier who had faced war in the Middle East, but was now waging an even greater fight within himself. On the outside, he seemed strong, but inside, he was broken. Nightmares woke him every night, memories of lost friends, the cries of war, and a fear that never left him. It was a dark valley of loneliness, and each day he felt like he was slipping further into it. But in that moment of deep pain, something was about to change. The courage that once sustained him in combat would need to be reborn in a different way, not against visible enemies, but against the fear that held him captive. Hello, friends of Tales of Faith. I'm Elias, and I invite you to walk with me through this inspiring journey. Today, we'll meet Ethan, an American soldier who discovered that life's greatest battle is not fought on the battlefield, but within the heart. Will you join us on this journey? Imagine yourself in his shoes. Have you ever faced moments when the darkness seemed stronger than the light? When every step felt too heavy to take? If you were in Ethan's place, what would you do in such a moment of despair? Ethan didn't know it yet, but he was about to discover that faith could be the most powerful weapon of all, a weapon that doesn't fire bullets, but heals invisible wounds and opens doors to a future that once seemed impossible. The story you're about to hear isn't just about pain and struggle. It's about hope, courage, and the realization that even in the darkest valleys, there's always a light waiting to shine. Ethan Miller had returned to his hometown in Texas after years serving as a Marine. To many, he was a hero. People greeted him on the streets, thanked him for his service, and his uniform was still remembered with respect. But inside, Ethan carried something far heavier than the medals on his shelf. Invisible scars that no one could see. He suffered from post-traumatic stress, a condition that consumed him day and night. The sound of fireworks made him tremble. A door slamming shut brought back the sound of explosions. His mind was still on the battlefield, even though his body was home. He tried to smile for his family, but he felt more distant with each passing day. His eyes, once full of life, now carried a weight only those who had seen war could understand. Many of his battalion buddies hadn't made it back, and the guilt of surviving haunted him like a shadow. Why me and not them, he thought every night, staring at the ceiling of his room. The war had stolen his peace, and now he felt like a stranger in his own home. His mother prayed for him daily, but Ethan, hardened by pain, could barely believe God still cared. How could he trust a God who allowed so much destruction to unfold before his eyes? What about you? Have you ever carried wounds no one else could see? Have you lived through moments when you smiled on the outside but were falling apart inside? If you were Ethan, how would you face those invisible scars? Ethan was about to learn that, while his scars might never fade, they could be transformed into something far greater than pain. His journey through the Valley of the Shadow was just beginning. Nights were the worst for Ethan. When everyone else was asleep and the town sank into silence, his mind became a battlefield. He would wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, hearing the gunfire, explosions, and cries of fallen comrades in his memory. His hands shook, and he often wandered to the kitchen for a glass of water, trying to convince himself he was safe. But the truth was, even in his own home, Ethan didn't feel protected. One night, after a nightmare more intense than the others, he went downstairs and found a photo of his father in the living room. His father had been a pastor at a small local church, a man of unshakable faith who had passed away years ago. Ethan stared at the picture and whispered, "Dad, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know if I can keep going." The emptiness inside him seemed to grow each day. And in that moment, the darkness tried to overtake him. Ethan began to wonder if there was no way out, if his life no longer had value. He thought of friends who, after returning from war, had taken their own lives. For a fleeting moment he wondered if that would be his fate too. Imagine for a second, when the pain feels unbearable and your strength is gone, what would you do? Have you ever faced a moment when the shadow was so thick it seemed impossible to find the light? Ethan was at a turning point. He could give in to the darkness or search for a way out, even if he didn't know where to start. Deep down, his soul was crying for help, but his heart, hardened by trauma, struggled to believe anyone could rescue him from this dark valley. Then, in the midst of this silent struggle, a gentle memory surfaced. His mother's voice, repeating a verse he'd heard since childhood. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Psalm 23:4. He tried to push the words away, but they echoed in his mind like a whisper of hope. The morning after a night of nightmares and heavy thoughts, Ethan decided to step outside for some air. He walked to a nearby park, a place where he used to play as a child. The sound of leaves rustling in the wind and the distant laughter of kids playing made him feel for a moment that there was life beyond the darkness surrounding him. But inside, the battle raged on. He sat on a bench, hunched over, his eyes lost on the ground, as if the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. That's when an older man approached. He had gray hair, a calm gaze, and carried a worn Bible under his arm. With a gentle smile, he introduced himself. "Good morning, young man. Mind if I sit here?" Ethan, a bit awkward, nodded. The man sat down and after a few seconds of silence said, "You know, sometimes life feels like a battlefield. But have you noticed that even in the toughest battles, we're never truly alone?" Those words hit Ethan in an unexpected way. He looked at the man, wary but curious. Who was this stranger who seemed to see beyond what his eyes revealed? The man continued, "I've seen a lot of soldiers come back from war, and I know the fight inside them is often bigger than the one they faced out there. But I've also seen this. When we reach out to God, He always reaches back." Ethan stayed silent. Inside, he wanted to believe, but the weight of his pain felt heavier than any words. Still, something about the man's voice stirred him, like a spark refusing to fade in the darkness. "What about you? Have you ever had an unexpected encounter with someone who showed up right when you needed them most?" If you were Ethan, sitting on that bench, hearing those words, how would you react? That stranger named Daniel didn't know it, but he was being used as an instrument to give Ethan his first spark of hope. And that spark would begin to change everything. That night, Ethan returned home changed. Daniel's words from the park echoed in his mind like a persistent whisper. When we reach out to God, He always reaches back. He tried to shake them off, but it was as if a seed had been planted in his heart. For the first time in a long time, he felt a small crack in the wall of pain he'd built around himself. But that spark also brought a dilemma. Lying in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, he thought, "Can I believe again? Does God still hear me, even after everything I've seen, everything I've done?" Memories of lost comrades, scenes of destruction, and screams still echoing in his mind seemed to crush any attempt at faith. He got up, walked to the kitchen, and poured a glass of water. His hands trembled slightly. Ethan knew he'd reached a point where he had to make a choice. He could keep trying to survive alone, sinking deeper into the darkness, or he could, despite his fear and doubts, take a step towards something greater than himself. The next morning, as he looked in the mirror, he saw a tired man with sunken eyes and a weary soul. But he also realized that despite everything, he was still alive. There was breath in his lungs, a new day before him. Maybe, just maybe, that meant his story wasn't over. What about you? Have you ever felt the weight of a choice that could change everything? Have you been at a crossroads, torn between giving up or starting over? If you were Ethan, caught between the pain of the past and the chance for new hope, What would you do? Ethan's heart was divided, but that morning marked the start of something different. He didn't know how, but he decided to seek out Daniel again. Deep down, maybe he believed their meeting wasn't just a coincidence. Ethan returned to the park at the same time, with a strange mix of anxiety and hope. He wasn't sure if he'd find Daniel again, but something inside urged him to try, and, as if it were meant to be, there was the gray-haired man sitting on the same bench, his old Bible open in his lap. Daniel greeted him with a warm smile. "I knew you'd come back, young man," he said calmly. Ethan frowned, surprised. "How could you know?" "Because those who carry pain in their hearts are always searching for answers, and I've seen eyes like yours before." Ethan let out a deep sigh and sat beside him. For the first time, he allowed himself to speak without a mask. He shared the battles he still fought at night, the friends he'd lost, the guilt that suffocated him, and even the dark thoughts that had haunted him. Daniel listened quietly, without judgment, with the care of someone who truly understood. When Ethan finished, it felt like a weight had been lifted from his chest. Daniel closed his Bible and placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Ethan, courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. Courage is moving forward, even when fear feels bigger. You survived the war, but now God wants to show you that you can survive within yourself too." Those words touched Ethan's heart deeply, like a balm on his invisible wounds, but doubt still lingered. "What if I can't do it?" he asked, almost whispering. Daniel smiled, looking into his eyes. "Then you let God carry what you can't. It is not about how much you can handle, it is about trusting. He does with you in the valley of the shadow." "What about you? Have you ever had someone listen to your pain without judgment, simply offering their presence? If you were Ethan, hearing words that felt like a second chance, how would you respond?" In Sauvignon Blanc, in that moment, Ethan felt something different. It wasn't a complete healing or the end of his battle, but it was the start of a path. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe there might be light at the end of his darkness. That night, Ethan returned home changed. Daniel Ye's words stayed with him. "It is not about how much you can handle, it is about trusting He is with you in the valley of the shadow." He lay in bed, unable to sleep, not just from memories of war, but from an idea that seemed impossible. What if he tried talking to God again? Ethan got up and walked to a room where he kept old boxes. After searching for a few minutes, he found a small Bible his father had given him years ago before he deployed. It was dusty, its pages yellowed, but as he opened it, he found a passage marked by his father, Psalm 23. With trembling hands, he read aloud softly, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." The words hit him as if written just for him. His eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in years, he knelt beside his bed. He didn't know exactly what to say, no rehearsed speech, but he whispered, "God, if you can still hear me, help me. I can't do this alone." It was a simple, almost shy prayer, but it was real. He didn't feel an immediate miracle or a sudden end to his pain. But something different happened, a gentle relief, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. It wasn't the final victory, but it was a first step. What about you? Have you ever had a moment when you didn't know how to pray but chose to open your heart anyway? Have you experienced the unexpected peace of a simple prayer, even without all the answers? That night, Ethan slept without nightmares for the first time in months. When he woke, sunlight streamed through the window, and in his heart, a certainty began to grow. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone in this fight. The following Sunday, Ethan woke earlier than usual. The mere thought of what he was about to do made him uneasy. It had been years since he'd stepped foot in a church. Since returning from war, he'd distanced himself from everything and everyone, especially faith. But now, after that timid prayer and his talk with Daniel, something inside told him it was time to try. He put on a simple shirt, took a deep breath, and left the house. As he drove to the small church where his father had preached for so many years, his mind buzzed with insecurities. What if they look at me differently? What if they don't understand? What if I don't fit in anymore, he thought. But as he parked in front of the building, his heart pounded. This place was full of memories, both good and painful. Inside, he was greeted by voices singing a gentle hymn. The notes filled the sanctuary like an invitation to peace. People recognized him immediately. Some smiled, others approached to shake his hand and thank him for his service. Ethan shyly just nodded. He wasn't there for recognition, but for something greater. He wanted to find meaning. During the sermon, the pastor read Isaiah 41:10. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. The words struck Ethan as if meant for him alone, as if God was speaking directly to his weary heart, reminding him he wasn't alone. Afterward, an elderly woman approached, holding his hand gently. My son, I prayed for you when I heard you were at war. Seeing you here today is an answered prayer. Ethan was speechless. He felt welcomed in a way he hadn't expected. That simple gesture reaffirmed that despite his fears, he still had a place. What about you? Have you ever been afraid to return to a place or restart something you'd left behind? If you were Ethan, would you have the courage to take that step, even carrying so many wounds? That day, Ethan left the church with tears in his eyes and a flame rekindled in his heart. His journey wasn't over, but he was finally walking toward the light. In the days following that service, Ethan began to feel something he hadn't in a long time: hope. Still, the journey wasn't easy. His mind remained a battlefield. Some days he woke feeling lighter, but there were also nights when nightmares returned with force, dragging him back to memories he wished he could forget. It was as if two voices fought within him. One whispered there was no way out, while the other insisted God was by his side. One early morning, after a vivid dream that left him waking with a racing heart, Ethan sat on the edge of his bed. He covered his face with his hands and said softly, I can't do this. I'm not strong enough. In that moment, Daniel's words came back. Courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. Courage is moving forward, even when fear feels bigger. The words echoed in his mind, but the inner struggle still felt suffocating. The next morning, he decided to seek Daniel again. He found him at the same park bench, as if waiting for him. Ethan poured out his relapses, his frustration at feeling he wasn't progressing fast enough. Daniel listened intently and calmly replied, Ethan, every battle you win is already a victory. The war inside you won't end overnight. But remember, you're not fighting alone. Daniel opened his Bible and read Philippians 1:6. He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Those words sank deep into Ethan's heart. Maybe the process was slow, but it was a process. Maybe healing came step by step, not in a single moment. What about you? Have you ever been frustrated by feeling you weren't moving forward fast enough? Have you wondered if you could truly overcome your inner battles? How would you react if you realized every small step was part of the victory? That day, Ethan left the park with a new perspective. The fight was still real, but he now understood that true strength lay in not giving up, even through setbacks. That's what brought him closer to victory. It was a summer afternoon in Texas when Ethan received an unexpected invitation. The pastor of the local church asked him to share a few words at a gathering for young veterans. Ethan's heart raced at the request. Speak in public? Share his story? He nearly declined on the spot. I have nothing to offer, he thought. But deep down, he knew this was more than a simple gesture. It was a call to face his greatest fear, exposing his wounds to others. In the days leading up to the event, he battled doubts. The old enemy of guilt whispered, "You don't deserve to talk about hope. You failed. You're no example to anyone." Ethan knelt each night, asking God for strength, clinging to Daniel's words and the verses now etched in his heart. When the day arrived, the room was filled with young veterans, many with heavy gazes reflecting pain like his own. Ethan stepped onto the small stage, hands sweating, chest tight. For a few seconds, the silence felt unbearable. Then he took a deep breath and said, "My name is Ethan Miller, and I fight battles that are still inside me." He spoke of his fears, sleepless nights, and hidden tears. He shared the dark thoughts and how, little by little, he began finding strength in God. He said courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to keep walking even when it seemed impossible. His simple, honest words brought tears to many in the room. In the end, Ethan held up the small Bible inherited from his father and declared, "I learned that even in the valley of the shadow, God never left me alone. And if he didn't abandon me, he won't abandon you either." Can you imagine the power of that moment? Have you ever thought about the impact your story, no matter how painful, could have on someone else's life? That day, Ethan's fear was replaced by something greater: courage. And that courage didn't come from him, but from the one who promised to be with him always. After that night, something shifted deeply in Ethan. By standing before those young veterans, opening his heart and sharing his wounds, he realized his pain wasn't a useless burden. It was a testimony that could spark hope in others. For the first time, he understood that God doesn't waste suffering. Even his scars could become bridges to reach lives. In the days that followed, Ethan became more active in the church community. He helped with small tasks, talked with other veterans, and slowly rediscovered joy in being around people. A group of young people approached him, asking for advice, wanting to hear more about his journey. This surprised Ethan, who once believed nothing good could come from his story. At home, his mother noticed the change too. Heavy silences were replaced by moments when Ethan read the Bible aloud. The empty look in his eyes gave way to a new light, fragile but real. He was learning to smile again. One day Daniel told him, "Ethan, God is turning your valley into a testimony. Do you see it?" Ethan smiled, emotional. "I do. I never imagined my wounds could be used to heal others." What about you? Have you ever considered that what hurt you most could be used to inspire and strengthen someone else? Imagine if the scars you carry today became stories of hope. Ethan still faced struggles, still had tough nights, but he no longer walked alone. He had rediscovered his faith, had a community by his side, and above all, had the certainty that God sustained him. What once seemed like the end was now just the beginning of a new journey. Time passed, and Ethan was no longer the broken man walking alone through the empty streets of Texas. He remained a soldier, but now in a different war. The fight to bring hope to those walking the same valley he once did. His scars remained, but instead of shame, they were marks of survival and testimony. Where there was once only silence and pain, there was now purpose. Ethan learned that courage wasn't living without fear, but choosing to trust God in the midst of fear. He discovered that true strength wasn't in his muscles or weapons of war, but in kneeling in prayer, acknowledging his frailty before the Creator. And it was in that place of surrender that he found the most important victory of his life. Friends, Ethan's story reminds us of something powerful. We all walk through dark valleys. They may be loss, trauma, illness, or fears that paralyze us. But like Ethan, we can discover we never walk alone. The God who was with Ethan in the silent early hours is the same God walking beside you today. Psalm 23:4 reminds us, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." Ethan experienced this promise firsthand. Even in the darkness, God never abandoned him. And Isaiah 41:10 reinforces, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." These verses show us that faith does not spare us from battles, but gives us courage to face them. The same God who sustained Ethan is ready to sustain you, no matter what valley you're crossing. Final prayer. Lord, thank you for never leaving us alone. Just as you strengthened Ethan, strengthen everyone facing fear, pain, or loneliness today. May we find in you the courage to move forward and the hope to start anew. In Jesus' name, amen. What about you? Have you walked through a similar valley? What did you learn in it? Share in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. May this story strengthen your faith. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the Tales of Faith channel, and share with someone who needs this message. Until next time, God bless you.